In meeting the minimum requirements of the tag video, I now must present my 5 explanations of the 5 facts in the previous video. But first I wanted to address a couple of things. First of all, this is a gopher snake or a bull snake. I also want to offer commendations to all those who seem to know a good beer when they see it. It's hard to get this stuff in Texas. The liquor store by my house finally imported the small ones. They still haven't got the Dunkel. If I want that, I have to drive several miles. But anyway, on to explaining my facts. First of all, apart from things like this, I really don't do drugs and never have. Small disclaimer there. Yes, I was a child of the 70s. I was a little kid in the 60s. I grew up listening to metal. I grew up in a biker culture and all of that sort of thing. And of course that leaves one in an inclination toward controlled substances, at least in that period of history. But in dabblings with that when I was in middle school, I'd say, somebody put something funny in the pipe. And I was led to believe it later that it was angel dust PCP, but I can tell you that the next 2, maybe 3 days of my life were not a bucket of chuckles at all. It was, I had some very serious moments, and that put me off drugs pretty much for the rest of my life. I'd had a couple of samplings years later, but you know, I just never could enjoy it after that. There was always an element of paranoia after that. I mean, when you see a baby in a tree, and well, no, I'm not going to go into all of it. But anyway, on to the rest of them. When I was a lot younger, let's say a quarter of a century ago now, I was probably a mite bit cuter than I am today. As a matter of fact, I was even hired once to be a male model for an organization called Benetton. That fell through when they wanted me to cut my hair in weird ways. Sorry, I'm just not that much into Duran, thank you very much. But suffice it to say, I was a bit of a pretty boy once upon a time. And so it wasn't that difficult, really, to pull off Sigourney Weaver. At least that's what I thought I looked like. They were doing a costume contest in college, and I had this girl come over the night before, and she brought over a prom dress with one of those big, poofy shoulders on it so that it would hide my natural shoulders. And it had one of those big taffeta dress pieces so it would look like I had hips. And she spent about 8 hours doing makeup, and I've got a great deal of sympathy for women. I cannot believe that anybody puts up with going through that ritual at all, ever, period. If I were a girl, I would look like Captain Bulldyke. I just couldn't do that. It was ridiculous. I mean, I went to school, I did the thing, it was a lot of laughs, but no, not for me. Don't know how you chicks do it. Anyway, so you can see it wasn't that much of a stretch. I'm sorry I don't have any pictures of that contest. I didn't keep pictures of pretty much anything back then. There are very few photos that survived of me. More people have taken pictures of me than I have seen myself, certainly. But anyway, moving on. I was born in Kingman, Arizona, which is a little tiny town in the desert, and it was a hospital that was later converted into a jail, and then shortly after that I don't think the building existed anymore at all. But we were only there about 2 weeks. A couple weeks old, we left and moved to Alaska, where my dad got a gig as a logger. Now what the idea was they were going to log a certain area of coastline, and they had to be able to move from bay to bay to bay as they cleared out one area and needed to move on. So the houses had to be completely mobile. For 2 years, we lived with 2 houses built on one wooden platform, and that wooden platform was mounted onto giant 6-foot diameter logs. And these would occasionally, once every few months or so, be hauled to the next bay by a sort of a tugboat sort of thing. You had to live on rafts, because if you lived on land, you had these 3,000-pound problems called grizzlies. And I remember one guy had built this like perfect idyllic log cabin, just like Abraham Lincoln would have had, you know, the idyllic Lincoln log kind of building. And he's frying up breakfast one morning shortly after he built the thing, and a Kodiak grizzly took the wall out of his house and entered, and were it not for bacon, he would not have escaped. Only one thing smells like bacon. And then there was another story about a guy that had crashed his plane, and a grizzly rolled the plane down the hill, tearing the wings off. That was a true story too. They were everywhere. We saw 35 grizzlies at one time while we were standing in a valley hunting for deer, peering around the hillsides around us. That's how plentiful they were. There were no roads at all. There was complete bush. The only way to go grocery shopping was to take a plane. We would take a little Cessna 150, I think, with just the 2 seats, and I would sit, I was a baby, I would sit in my mother's lap, no seatbelt in a plane, and they would fly me to Petersburg. It's only 14 miles away, but it would take all day in a boat, and there was no other way to get there at all. So, on the way back, we would take something called a Grumman Goose. We would buy a month's worth of groceries and load it on this boat plane, and that would fly us back home, land on the water, and we would transfer everything back to the raft. There were periods when the bay would freeze over and we couldn't leave, and once when the bay froze, our house kind of sat, as the water level dropped, and our house sat in the black muck mud, kind of cantered sideways a little bit, and we stayed like that for several months because nobody could get to us. And we ate salmon every single day. I was potty trained on a toilet seat that was mounted on top of a rain barrel that was fitted into a precisely cut hole in the floor, and if you look through the toilet seat you could see 7-foot salmon, and whales went under our house on occasion. It really was an interesting time. Probably the best toy that I remember having, I was a little bitty kid, but I remember having one of those old-fashioned washing machines with a hand-crank dryer mechanism, and I would sit inside that, and it would be my fighter plane, it would be my submarine, whatever sort of vehicular mode I needed. That was my toy. It was the best thing I had. It was an old 1940s washing machine sitting on a raft in a bay in Alaska. Now, in the 80s, I was approached by members of the University of Texas at El Paso. They said they were doing a musical of Jesus Christ Superstar. They liked my look. They saw all the studded leather and all the piercings and all the crap that I had on back then. I was really into metal at that time, and they wanted me to do Judas Iscariot. Asked me if I knew the songs, and I did. I could even sing them at that time, just from memory, but they decided that would be a good thing to have me play a Judas Priest version of Judas Iscariot, and they were going to do this musical performance of Jesus Christ Superstar. And I loved the character that was represented Judas in the original movie. That guy went on to sing with Frank Zappa later on, or at least play with Frank Zappa. And I had enormous respect for the guy that played in the movie for that character, for the way he did it. But I was going to do it a little bit differently. Sadly, though, this is the lie. I did not perform that character because the college decided they couldn't come up with enough talent or interest in Jesus Christ Superstar, so they weren't going to proceed with it. That show never actually happened. But more recently, here a couple of years ago, my ex, my son's mother, sent me a message in the mail saying, do you want to be a zombie or just yourself? And I looked at the ad, and I had nothing to do with the making of this movie other than following the ad to be an extra in it. So I don't want to be associated in any other way in the creation of this film, because I know there are certain people that would want to credit me for that, and not my gig. I played a biker, which is what they asked for. It was either bikers or zombies. And my son played a zombie. We had a great time. Well, I'll just let you guys check it out for yourselves. Here's the trailer.
Join us this weekend for the Saturday afternoon matinee. Our feature presentation is The Zombie Christ, an action extravaganza of post-apocalyptic proportions. Zombies have overrun the world, and only one man can save humanity again. Starring Phil Elder, Justin Arnold, and introducing Ernest Ebanks, with Sherman Allen as Tinker. This Saturday at 3 p.m. only on WSUK. Stay tuned for your late local news.